bring in Peter King, NBCSports.com columnist. How big a story was that, though? Was that like 15 years ago, Pete, when the NFL just floated the idea of maybe the Super Bowl in London?
Yeah, I never really bought it, Dan. I mean,
Hmm.
it'd be one thing if some Russian oligarch swooped in and said, $3 billion if you play a Super Bowl in London. Then Roger Goodell is saying, where do I sign? But I'd find it hard to believe it'd be like, playing, Manchester United playing a big game at MetLife Stadium or something. It just seems like it doesn't belong, and it never did.
How much do you follow mock drafts?
Hardly at all, because I have to do one, and I don't want to get stuck in sort of the kind of groupthink that if I see 28 people put the same player in for a team, then I'm going to say, okay, well, I better put that guy there. I don't like to do it. The only time I really kind of look at mock drafts is when I think that the people who do them are really smart and well connected. But otherwise, I don't really pay much attention to them.
How do you do your mock draft?
Well, today is sort of the day that I've been asking around a little bit, but it's just too early. And so today is the day that I have a list of about 15 people who I call. I don't talk to people on every team because most people who work for teams are not going to tell you what they are thinking.
Yep.
Okay. Now, they have friends on other teams and they've talked to other teams, and they might say, because I always say, what do you know that you think I should know? Because really, Dan, and I talked to some agents who are very well connected. And then I try to talk to, there's some recently retired coaches as well, and personnel people who still this time of year treat this as sort of a hobby, talking to their friends, because you might not be a general manager anymore, but you're still talking to people who are, and they're curious about what's going to happen too. And some of whom are in the media. So it's a weird little dance. But, Dan, it's funny. Last year I had the best year I ever had. I got 11 first round picks to the team in the round. Now, some of them I had with trades and everything like that. And so I always think that if I can get like a quarter of the picks correct, and everybody said, well, geez, how hard is it to tell Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence? Well, it's not hard. But most of the picks after that are, there's a degree of difficulty with.
Are you settling in on what the Niners are going to do at 3?
No, that's going to be a weekend call for me, hopefully with some people who know a little something about what the Niners are thinking. As we sit here right now, I'm thinking Mac Jones, but that's stale and old. And clearly, if John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have gone to see Justin Fields and Trey Lance since it was not presumed, but since it was logically deemed that Mac Jones is the leader in the clubhouse, who knows? Maybe they have changed their minds. Now, if I'm sitting here right now and we're talking, I say, I don't think they've changed their minds, but I wouldn't really, I don't know that for sure. And hopefully I'll know something by the weekend.
How did you react when you heard the quotes, the comments from Trevor Lawrence in Sports Illustrated, where he sort of talked about the game's important, but not as important. It's not his whole life.
I don't know. I think sometimes, Dan, we want guys to, everybody to have the attitude of Peyton Manning, that before he goes to bed at night, he will send, he did this late in his career in Denver. I'm sure he did it in Indy too, but late before he'd go to bed at night, he would send some voice notes on his phone to Adam Gase, who at the time was his offensive coordinator. Gase saved them all. And they're like, whatever, 45 seconds. Hey, on this play that we're planning to run third quarter, I think we ought to put this guy into motion left to right rather than right to left, and blah 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 blah. And I'm not saying I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have some of those traits. Also in that story, he said, I told my high school coach I wanted to be the best to ever do it. So I don't know, Dan. I guess I look at it and say, until I hear from people who've been close to Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, who have kind of a raised eyebrow and said, "Man, I'll tell you what, he's not a worker bee, or he's not a hard worker." We've never heard that, so it really didn't bother me all that much.
The only reason why I took notice of it was nobody ever thought that Andrew Luck was going to walk away before the age of 30. And
Yeah.
I know he had injuries, but he had moved past that. He was sacked 18 times the previous season. They had a good offensive line. They were starting to round into a playoff caliber team, and he had other interests. And I think, you get married, you have a child. He just walked away. So that's the only reason why I took note of what Trevor said is, he was the guy who couldn't miss. He was the next John Elway, and he walked away.
I think you're right, Dan, but I also think that he would not have walked away if every day of his life he wasn't in pain. And Andrew Luck could not get over these injuries that he had, multiple injuries, and he just never felt right. And he said, "Why do I need this? I don't need this." And I don't think it had all that much to do with the money. I know him a little bit. He's definitely not a money guy. And it's also why he really hasn't had a lot of thoughts about coming back. I do think he loved football, but I think football didn't love him back, or didn't love his body back. And I think it was a lot more having to do with the pain and discomfort that he felt 365 days a year, rather than some diminution of his love of football.
Has anybody talked to Andrew Luck in depth?
The Colts talked to him before they made the Carson Wentz trade.
Oh, they did.
And
they did talk to him about coming back.
Well, they talked to him just to say, "Hey, what's your story? What what do you?" And clearly, nothing has come out about what exactly was said, but I think he had to leave them with this impression that I'm not playing football.
Talking to Peter King, NBCSports.com columnist, Football Morning in America, must read for everybody. The team that you're most curious about in 8 days is who?
The Atlanta Falcons. I mean, we know the 49ers are going to take a quarterback. We just don't know which one. The Falcons, I think, are really interesting because everybody thinks the owner is making this pick. And I can tell you that that's a lie. The owner is not making the pick. The owner doesn't hire a new general manager and new head coach, and the first momentous decision they could make, that he jumps the line and says, "I want you to take a quarterback." Now, he's an owner of a team. He wants to make sure he has quarterback certainty, for the next 15 years. And they might take a quarterback, but the only way, I was told this categorically, the only way that they're going to take a quarterback is if they are absolutely all in that he's going to be a great player. Because, Dan, I think you could look at, because they're going to have to sign Matt Ryan to a new deal, obviously, after the next couple of years. This is his age 36 season this year. He told me a couple of years ago he wanted to play into his 40s, just like Tom Brady. So unless you either don't think that he's the guy to lead you to the Super Bowl, or you don't want to have a guy, $40 million on your cap on average for the next, say, 5 years. You can save on average probably about $30 million a year once you get rid of Matt Ryan by having a quarterback on his rookie contract. It allows you to do so much more. But my feeling is that they have so many choices. They could go quarterback, they could go generational tight end, or they could trade down. And I'm fascinated by the Falcons right now.
What are Jerry Jones and his son Steven doing by this outward fawning over Kyle Pitts? They're at number 10. Is it just they like to talk, or like I wouldn't tell you what I truly like, but I'm trying to understand their logic, if there is logic here.
In 2016, when they drafted Ezekiel Elliott in the first round and they drafted Dak Prescott in the fourth round, I had access to their draft room that weekend. And the one thing I learned is that Jerry Jones has the ability to play the trump card. Okay. He desperately wanted Paxton Lynch that year. Desperately. And Stephen Jones was on the phone for 70 minutes before Paxton Lynch ended up going to the Denver Broncos in a trade. And Jerry Jones was just despondent at missing it. And so anybody who says, Jerry is going to tell him, hey, we're going up and getting Kyle Pitts. I'm not saying they're not going up to get Kyle Pitts, but the price to get Kyle Pitts is that number one pick plus next year's one, all but certainly. So if you're the Dallas Cowboys and you have great weaponry on offense, do you want to trade your next 2 ones in order to draft a tight end? I mean, I just can't see it. They're better off sitting there and getting a tackle with their offensive line kind of being a little bit in tatters now. They need to protect Dak Prescott. If I were them, I'd sit there and take Rashawn Slater.
If you had to bet in what the Patriots were going to do.
No, Dan, I give up. I wrote the other day that Bill Belichick has honchoed 25 drafts. He's never picked a quarterback higher than number 62. How amazing is that? Not only has he never picked a quarterback in the first round, he never picked a quarterback till the end. The highest he ever picked one was at the end of the second round. Yeah. So that would seem to tell you, well, they're not taking a quarterback. Well, did you ever think they were going to spend $8 jillion on free agents? I didn't. And they did it this year. So I think all bets are off with the Patriots. I will not be surprised to see them trade up to, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, to pick whatever quarterback is on the board. Or I wouldn't be surprised if they just sat where they were and then in the second round took Kyle Trask. Those kind of things wouldn't surprise me.
You can join Peter, NFL Network's Steve Weish, as well as ESPN's Mike Tannenbaum and Matthew Berry. Tomorrow night at 8 Eastern, they will preview next week's draft during an online fundraiser benefiting the Youth Literacy Program. It's called Right on Sports. The event is free to watch. Donate throughout the show. Go to rightonsports.org at 8 Eastern. Help change the life of a student near you. It's a good idea. Who came up with this idea, Pete?
This is a brilliant thing. Byron Yake, who's the former Associated Press sports editor, retired and wanted something to do with his life. And Byron said, I want to help adolescent kids who are falling behind in school in writing and reading. And so he said, what do these kids want to write and read about? Sports, boys and girls. And so he has changed so many lives over the last 15 years. I really appreciate you mentioning this, and I'm thrilled to be a part of the program.
It's called Right on Sports, WRITE, rightonsports.org, 8 Eastern tomorrow night with Peter, Mike Tannenbaum, Steve Weish from the NFL Network, and Matthew Berry. Pete, have fun. Great to talk to you. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.